Hi, this is Jill Bates, ESU 8 Assistant Administrator, bringing you the first in a series of Wednesday webinars. Each live webinar will be recorded and a link placed on the ESU 8 website so school staff can access the information 24/7. Our initial webinar, entitled Hazard Communication Standard, is intended to provide school staff with basic information as required by OSHA and recommended by the Nebraska Department of Labor. The Occupational Health and Safety Association has established the Hazard Communication Standard related to the use of chemicals in the workplace. This standard, also known as HAZCOM or the Right to Understand standard, describes what employers must do to ensure that their employees are handling chemicals safely. The goals of this webinar, as required by OSHA, are to share basic information about the revised HAZCOM standard for school staff, including elements of the new chemical labels and the uniform safety data sheet format. So let's get started. According to our U.S. Secretary of Labor, exposure to chemicals is one of the most serious threats facing American workers today. She goes on to say that she believes the revisions to the HAZCOM standard will make the workplace safer for all American employees. According to OSHA estimates, every day more than 32 million workers are exposed to 650,000 chemical products in more than 3 million workplaces. Our schools are no exceptions. There are an estimated 945,000 existing chemical products on the market today in the U.S., and hundreds of new ones are being introduced annually. We'll all agree that everyone is entitled to a safe and healthful place to work. You also have a right to understand what chemicals you might be exposed to and how to protect yourself. We know that chemical exposure can sometimes cause rashes or burns, or even contribute to more serious medical conditions. So, what is a hazardous chemical? Well, a hazardous chemical is any chemical that is classified as a physical or health hazard, combustible dust, or an agent that can cause suffocation or spontaneously ignite on contact with air. We're surrounded by hazardous chemicals, including chemicals in schools that might include toner, some inks, paint products, fertilizers, chemical reagents in our science classrooms and labs, some cleaning products, and certain types of glues and adhesives. Employers that use hazardous chemicals have a responsibility to tailor a safety plan to meet the needs and hazards of their specific workplace, including an inventory of hazardous chemicals, safety data sheets for all identified hazardous chemicals, current labels, and employee training. This basic training that you're receiving today is the first step in compliance with the revised HAZCOM standard and is required to be completed by December 1st, 2013. There are other specific requirements that will be phased in over the next 3 years through June 2016. Employers have requirements and responsibilities, but as a school employee, we also have responsibilities to follow all school policies and procedures related to chemical use. We should seek information when appropriate and wear personal protective equipment as needed. If we're lacking instruction or authorization to use a chemical, we shouldn't use it. Remember, seek information when appropriate, and even if a minor injury or exposure occurs, report it immediately. Product labels are often our best source of information. Always read product labels before mixing chemicals together and never dispose of old or unused chemicals before identifying the disposal manner dictated by either the product label or the safety data sheet. A safety data sheet, which I'll describe in more detail later, is simply a bulletin put out by chemical manufacturers that gives details about both the physical and the health hazards of the product. The revised HAZCOM standard incorporates parts of the globally harmonized system of classification of chemicals and labeling. This GHS standardizes chemical classification and labels around the world. Now, these labels have specific requirements. They must be in English and provided in other languages for non-English speaking employees, because according to OSHA, each worker has the right to understand. OSHA's HAZCOM standard requires 6 specific label components: product identifier, signal word, hazard pictogram, hazard statements, precautionary statements, and the supplier's identification information. Let's take a closer look. The product identifier is simply how the hazardous chemical is identified. It's usually the chemical name, although it can be a code number or a batch number. There are only 2 words that are used as signal words, either danger or warning. Danger is used for more severe hazards and warning for the less severe hazards. These words are used to alert the user to the relative level of severity of the hazard. Hazard pictograms are graphic symbols used to communicate specific information about the hazards of a chemical. They are one of the key elements of labeling under the GHS. And all pictograms have specific characteristics: a black symbol with a white background within a red frame set at a point. As of June 1st, 2015, the HAZCOM standard will require labels to include these pictograms, which alert users to the chemical hazards to which they may be exposed. OSHA has designated 8 pictograms, including health hazard, flame, exclamation mark, gas cylinder, corrosion, exploding bomb, flame over circle, and skull and crossbones. The environment pictogram shown in the center of the bottom of this diagram isn't mandatory by OSHA, but it might be used to provide some additional information about environmental hazards. A hazard statement describes the nature of a chemical and, where appropriate, the degree of hazard. For example, causes damage to kidneys through prolonged or repeated exposure when absorbed through the skin. Precautionary statements give more information. They describe how the user can minimize or prevent dangerous effects. And there are 4 types of precautionary statements: prevention, such as do not breathe dust or fumes; response, get medical advice or attention if you feel unwell; storage, store in a cool, well-ventilated place; and finally, disposal, dispose of contents in accordance with local and state regulations. The final label requirement is the manufacturer contact information. So if you found a bottle of sulfuric acid in a closet at school, on which keyword from this GHS label would you focus to determine if the chemical is hazardous? Well, naturally, danger. The signal word danger should immediately focus your attention to the hazardous nature of this acid. The 2 pictograms, skull and crossbones, and corrosion should also grab your attention. Remember that precautionary statements will assist you with prevention to minimize exposure. They'll give you actions to take in case of accidental spillage or contact, including first aid, proper storage, and disposal. Now, there are some exceptions to the HAZCOM standard, including household chemical products. However, when these same products are used in greater frequency than at home, for example, when a custodian uses some type of a cleaning product several times during the day and uses them daily, or when the regular use is changed, labels and safety data sheets must follow the HAZCOM standard. Some specific exceptions to the new labeling requirements include foods, pesticides, prescription and over-the-counter drugs, and consumer products that are regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Act. The revised HAZCOM standard also requires a standardized format for safety data sheets. These were formerly known as material safety data sheets, and you may know them as MSDSs. The new safety data sheets must accompany hazardous chemicals and give a much more complete resource for details. The information must be presented in a consistent, user-friendly 16-section format. Now, here are the 16 sections. If you focus on just sections 1 through 8, you'll see that they contain general information including hazards, composition, safe handling practices, and emergency control measures. This information should be especially helpful for those who need to get the information quickly. The remaining sections, 9 through 16, contain more technical and scientific information in addition to considerations related to disposal, transport, and the environment. And some of these informational sections might be important for your custodial staff to be aware of, especially disposal considerations or transport information. Now, here's a sample GHS safety data sheet, and you can see the different components. There is the product and identification, the hazard identification, composition information, first aid measures, firefighting measures, accidental release measures, handling and storage, and precautions to control exposure or information about personal protective equipment. The second page gives sections 9 through 16 and includes that more technical and scientific information, although you do see that there is information about disposal and ecological considerations. The new safety data sheet format is consistent for all chemicals. For example, Section 8 will always give information about personal protective equipment and exposure limits, etc. In addition, information on both the label and the safety data sheet will be related, so the pictograms will be the same. The precautionary statements will be identical. If you'd like more detailed information, you can check out OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard website by going to this address or simply by Googling Hazard Communication Standard. Resources at this site include 3 quick cards, label, pictogram, and safety data sheet, and also more information in the OSHA briefs on the safety data sheets and labels and pictograms. Our goal for this webinar was to give you information about the new revised HAZCOM standard, including the label elements and safety data sheets. If you have additional questions, feel free to contact me either at my email address or call the service unit extension 1224. Thanks for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at upcoming Wednesday webinars.